Today's home therapy session is with my lovely friend, Cara. She was so gracious to have me on her podcast recently, and now I get to have her on my podcast. So exciting. Welcome, Cara.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for you and the show, and I'm so excited to be here. I feel like it's going to be good.
Oh, I feel like it's good too. I don't know if it's New Year vibes or whatever, new podcast vibes, but I'm super excited.
Yeah.
And very grateful to have you on because I love amplifying women who just kick ass and definitely kick ass on so many different levels. I, was kind of doing some background information on your history, and I'm just going to dive in because when it comes to home therapy sessions, we always like to start from the beginning, right? Like, how did our story begin? And I know for you, it was your contractor dad.
Absolutely.
I'm really curious. How did he, growing up, impact your vision and, career that you have today? Or what about his role in your life has really propelled you into what you do?
Yeah. So for context, I lost my dad to cancer in 2014, but growing up, he was my best friend. Like, we were really similar personalities. We did everything together, and he was like my main coach and teacher. I played like a lot of sports. I was totally a tomboy. So I was like very comfortable in like male dominated spaces, like on the playground with the boys instead of the girls. I don't know how it ended up that way, but that's what it was. So I was just raised believing like I could do anything. And I think a lot of the normal conditioning that comes with being raised as a girl, like I had like kind of an antidote to that with him. It's like my mom was like, pink and be a lady and we'll put you in ballet for 9 years so you're not so clumsy. And my dad was just like, yeah, you can be whoever you want. And so I think that really set the tone.
Choose the right audio apps for you.
Well, she's helping. Okay. I think that really set the tone for me just believing I could do anything. And so I think then I went to college for business and went into a oil and gas finance role, which is another male dominated space. My title was literally landman because, it's like old school. And then that to like now what I'm doing with DIY contracting and power tools. And so it's always been kind of just paving my own way, really unconventional, really windy path, which I think a lot of creative industries are. It's just like, all over the place.
I'm really curious. What sign are you? Do you know?
I'm a Cancer Sun, Aries rising. So,
okay. So this is where we align, because if you're Aries rising, I'm Aries Sun, and I'm like, such an Aries and so many. So, okay, now it resonates.
Yeah, because I just recently this year learned we're supposed to be reading for our rising sign, and it started resonating more. I was like, okay, I have always been feisty and fiery and like needed to come first, like so competitive, like, so I'm like, I see it.
Yeah, because I'm just like, how is she not an Aries? But you're Aries rising, which they say is probably even a more significant sign to observe and watch than your sun. I am tried and true Aries. Like, if you read everything, including the, a little flare temper sometimes, but that's modified.
Right.
But like, I'm very like a fire sign.
Same.
My rising is Aquarius, which was really interesting to me. But Aquarius placements are very, very creative. So that
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. But going back to your dad.
Yeah.
I love that because my dad is an architect and I grew up with so many influences from him, just very indirect. Me and my sister were the ones that sat in front of him while he was making his practicing his pitches for the next day for architecture meetings and things. And so that really influenced us. And he was definitely, both my mom and him were all about girl power. So I love hearing how your dad really influenced you in such a positive way. And now you are teaching women to not be afraid of, finding their voice at home, which, as a therapist and designer, that's my whole platform and passion as well. For you, DIYs, let's talk a little bit about that, because I truly believe DIYs not only strengthen our muscles physically, but I think there's like an emotional muscle, a mental muscle to get through it and finish the project. It takes such mental stamina. And when I am on social media watching you do this, I have to admit, I have a Mr. Meticulous. That's what we call Travis, or my construction crew when we're on client renovations. I have, I'll do it and I like it and I'll feel empowered, but I have some backup.
Which is totally fine. I always say do it yourself, but don't do it alone.
Well, and you got to know your wheelhouse, like what you're good at, what your strengths. And honestly, like there's just some things we leave it for the experts, right?
Right. Like plumbing. I don't touch plumbing.
Plumbing is a huge thing. I think electrical, we can kind of learn, but plumbing, it's touch and go. So I'm curious for you, what has been your DIY journey to, how did you build this muscle to finally land where you're at right now?
I love that you called it a muscle, because that's absolutely the truth. I always say I did it one tool and one project at a time. Like when I started out, I was literally terrified to use a saw. Like I'd grown up using a drill, like working with my dad, but no saws. So I would plan out all my projects. I would go to Home Depot, have them cut the lumber, bring it home, screw it together, do like sanding and staining. And so it was just little by little. But definitely like I was terrified at the beginning. And so I think the process of learning how to be afraid of something, push yourself to do it in a way that's safe, where you're getting like the information and support you need. Like that's a really hard process, especially doing it on your own. I don't know. You just got to be like brave. And I always say the fear is there to keep you safe, but not to hold you back. But I think with any creative process, like we're transforming spaces, but we're also transforming ourselves. Like there's an inherent, like a classic hero's journey of like set out to do this, hit the big problem, like, oh no, will we make it? Figure out how to fix it and then have a good result. And it's just that again and again and again. And so when you're comfortable with messing up, and when you're comfortable with taking risks and not knowing that it's going to go perfect, but knowing that you're going to figure it out and trusting like that ability within yourself, which is a muscle, like you have to build. That's how you get through it. And so it's like, then the process, and it's like, we can do this 100 times with 100 different projects because we know how the process works, kind of thing.
I really love that, because and this is maybe a general assumption, but maybe it's also a correct one. As women, we have to multitask, and there's a lot of expectations on us, and then we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And when we start on any endeavor, it's very easy for us to think in perfectionistic terms. And from drawing from what you just said, it feels like your expectation of a DIY project is not necessarily coming from a perfectionistic mindset. Right. Could you share, like, for someone who's listening right now, who's so like, they admire so much of what you do, they admired what I've done, but there's no way, like, what mindset do I have? Like, could you share, what's an initial mindset they can start off with and kind of practice thinking? Yeah.
I think definitely I would say experimentation. I think online does us a disservice because it's like before and after, and we really don't get into the nitty gritty of the middle, which is like, if we were honestly to show that process, it would take months and months and no one would want to watch that content. So like fair, but also like, I don't think the everyday person sees how much goes into it. And so because we're not being shown that, that's something you have to figure out for yourself. And once you realize like how hard it is, and then it's not you, that's just how the process is, I think you can be a lot more gracious with yourself. but going into it with an open mind of like experimentation and like literally expecting things will go wrong. Absolutely. And it's not your fault. It's just the nature of doing something you haven't done before. Like you don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. And learning how to pivot. I always say the magic is in the messy middle. Like that's when really things come together. It's like you can make the best plan in the world, but once you get into it and there's like a material is out of stock, or the tool broke, or there's a stud in the wall where you didn't think was going to be, and you have to pivot and adapt your plan, like that actually is such an opportunity for things to turn out better than you could have planned, because it's a problem that you have to solve. And I really believe that like creativity is best when it's solving a problem instead of just sitting out like down to a blank page to draw something. So yeah, I think that's kind of the process. And I've learned to like accept that, you know?
You're hitting on so many amazing points, because one time I was in yoga class and the teacher had just mentioned, you know, it was a really hard pose. And she said, just lean into the pain, like instead of fighting it, lean into the pain. Yeah. And I was like, what a great analogy for everything else that's challenging for us. Yeah. And when it comes to DIYs or learning a tool, I think I definitely can do the drill. I can, with, you know, someone by me, I can do the saw. It would be very scary to do the saw from scratch, you know, by myself. Yeah. Now I actually really love cutting tile. That is,
it's so satisfying. Yeah.
I love that. But for you to mention the messiness in the middle, because it's, you know, in therapy, that's what we help people with, is accepting the mess. So I appreciate the words that you just shared. Yeah. You have, you know, in your collection of DIYs, I'm so curious, has there ever been one DIY that you felt was like, oh man, that was the most mentally, not just physically, but that was a, you know, a humdinger, you know, like that was a really mentally challenging DIY, and I'm curious how you got through to the end.
Yeah. All of them for different reasons. But I think early on I had this like bar cart I made where I really planned everything out, had all these measurements, went to put it together, and it was just crooked and wonky, and it was on wheels, and it was like hobbling along. It was horrible. I ended up like scrapping it completely because it just didn't work out. And what I realized is like there was just tools I didn't know I could use, like clamps and speed squares and things to hold things straight while I was drilling. And I really took it personally, like my plan was bad, when I later realized like I just didn't know the things that could have made it easier. And so realizing that like it's not your skill that's maybe lacking. It can also just be tools or just like knowledge you need to gain. And then a larger DIY project is this house. It just keeps getting wet. Like everything is like there's pipes burst and the roof is leaking and like all these unexpected things where, you know, as you go on, like the projects get bigger or the stakes get higher or your skill level expands, but you hit the same, like, you know, the scale increases, but it's the same dynamic of like, what am I getting into? Like, I don't think I'm ready for this. And yeah, I think learning just to like be comfortable with like, well, it's a dumpster fire, but I will figure it out because I always have. And I know I can do that. But I also just view it as like, that's like a natural growth cycle. Like in our society, I think we always think of like this linear like growth where it's like 1, 2, 3, next. But really, if you look at nature, it's like there's a whole process of like fall and then decay and then things being destroyed, or like within DIY, like there's demo. And so there's a part of creation that's actually destruction and actually getting yourself to a blank slate or in the middle of the mess where you can then make something. And so that's like normal, you know?
I absolutely love that. In fact, that's something you help us go through in your journal, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like just highlighting the seasons and mimicking that to our evolution at home. Mm-hmm. I think it's so fantastic. Yeah. So now that we're in the new year, what season are we in, and what are your what's your advice on what we can do in our home now?
Yeah. I think a lot of people go into January with like New Year's resolutions, blank slate, whatever. But if you look around, like winter is still sleeping, like everything is still like resting. And so if you don't feel that fire to like fix your whole house and organize everything, like that's actually probably normal. And that might come in spring. It's like there's spring cleaning and new beginnings. And so I would say just kind of like use this time to observe. I think as the weather is cold, we're inside more, you can kind of observe how you're existing in your house and kind of bring to your attention like problem areas, like what rooms aren't working, where are things piling up and building up, and kind of noticing so that when you do feel inspired for spring to start new things, you kind of have like that context and you kind of have like, okay, I see this space that could really use something, like now it's go time, let's do it. But taking time to just be restful and just observe is like really underrated. Like it can really help you make a plan that's like a really aligned plan where you know what you want versus like being rushed. Like I need to change. Let's go to Pinterest. Let's find a photo. Let's like start today. Like, you know, so yeah, that's what I'm doing over here, at least.
I love that. Now, for personalities like mine who want to take rest, and I do take rest, I actually have seasonal affect disorder. So it's kind of the next few months is always kind of a struggle. Right. So doing something with my hands, I'm tactile. It's my outlet. It's my release.
Yes.
So what is, what's your take on observing our home and being with our home, which I'm totally on board with, but are there any small, quick, easy design projects that you think, will hold us over into maybe bigger, larger projects in the spring or summer? What are your favorite go-to design, small projects that we can tackle now?
Yeah. Ooh, I love this question. I mean, I was the kid that was rearranging my room every other week, so I think there's so much power in reworking what you have to kind of experiment and be like, okay, if I move this lamp over here, like how does that change the room? And so like getting tangible and like rearranging things and just like living with it for a second to see if you like it can help inform the big decision and the big makeover later so that you know what you want and like how it looks. I love art. Like I love doing like little frames, or I always use like drop cloths like for painting and make my own canvases, which is amazing for like big scale art too, because it's so cheap to do with just some lumber and a canvas or a shower curtain if you don't want to do your own painting. But art's always really good because I feel like everyone always has a blank wall that you're looking to fill. So doing a project where you're like, I made that, and it's more small scale and simple, and practicing tools, that can be really fun. Lighting, I always just like add lighting to every single corner, or like a mirror.
What's your favorite type of light? Like sconces, floor lamps, table lamps? Like what's your repertoire?
Definitely floor lamps and sconces and dimmable. And I really like the like lamps that go over like photos, like for gallery walls. They just make everything look so elevated. And there's like those rechargeable ones, which is amazing.
Have you seen those ones from Amazon? Like that's really amazing.
Yeah. They look like real hardwired, like expensive gallery lights, but it's like $30 and you can recharge it and hang it anywhere.
That's a 2024 design element I definitely want to add is those lighting. And then with no wiring, that's so approachable for people who don't want to do electrical or don't know how. Like
exactly, or don't have wiring. Like you don't have wiring. Right.
I love that one too. And then when it comes to color, lighting and color kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I'm so curious, what is your favorite color?
Oh my gosh, it changes every day, but I think currently brown, which is really random. I just love like the earthy, like I'm loving like a deep, moody brown, which is weird, but that's where we're at.
It's not weird because it is on trend. So
right?
It's a huge trend towards dark, moody brown. Like, so instead of white cream neutrals, it is now into the dark, moody brown neutrals, and maybe a like a undertone of burgundy into the brown, like in your backdrop. It kind of that,
like earthy and deep, and
yes. It's so funny. I don't know if you struggle with this, but what we grew up with sometimes will counteract what's on trend now.
Yeah,
maybe I'm pretty sure I'm older than you, but like there's some things that are just like, but why? I grew up with that, and I don't know if like it triggers a lot of core memories that are not bad, but it's like it feels out of date because you grew up.
Yeah, exactly. Like even fashion too, like all the 90s stuff is coming back, and it's like, I already wore all this once and I don't know that I could do it again. Like I want something else. Like,
do you remember the whitewash, what is it? Stonewash jeans or whatever?
Yeah.
There's so much stonewash jeans. Like when my daughters wear it, and I'm like, I don't know if I can.
Right? It's like, that's so outdated, right? Exactly.
But yeah, so there's a lot of like Nancy Meyer kitchens coming back. And I remember going to friends' homes, you know. We grew up in an Asian American home, so it was kind of a more mishmash of Asian and Western culture. But I remember going to my school friends' homes and their kitchens. And so when I see it, I have wonderful memories, but at the same time, it feels like, am I back in time? You know?
Right. So, like time travel.
Really,
but that's what I always laugh about is like, if you wait 20 years, it'll be back. Like I'm really hoping these popcorn ceilings come back so I don't have to scrape them, because that's the worst project. So I'm like, anyone, like it's time. It's been years.
That is so funny. Which leads to my question is like, okay, brown is your favorite color. What is your hugest design ick? I'm so curious.
Ooh.
It's something that just gets your skin crawling.
Yeah, I feel like right now it's like chunky wood that's like where we didn't stain it right because we didn't put wood conditioner and sand it, which I know is just a look, like it's just rustic. But I think for me, oddly enough, it's like my mom's design style. Like she was like farmhouse before farmhouse was cool. So she always had all these antiques and all these like old things around, and I just like hated it all growing up. I wanted it modern and clean and like 2000s vibe, sleek and stainless steel. And so it's like funny because it's like that's just a personal thing. Like it's a totally valid design style, but I'm like, ugh, no, that looks like my mom. It looks old. It looks, you know.
It's funny because lived-in styles, you know, lived-in homes are completely trending right now, and I love it because there's less pressure on us, right? Like living in the mess. That's amazing. Yeah. But then it kind of can veer into certain avenues where I do get a little cringe, you know?
Right.
Like, I don't know if I can relive that rustic accent wood wall anymore.
Right. It's too much for me. Yeah.
It was beautiful in its time, and it still is beautiful for people who love it.
Right.
But I think I'm like you. I've always been more clean and modern and light and bright. But I am really loving venturing into the moody room aesthetics. I'm excited to try that out.
Yeah.
How about you?
Same, because I don't usually do that. But then looking back, it's like I had a whole era where I did everything dark brown, maroon. My like whole room in high school was like coffee theme. I like stole paint out of the garage, and it was very like dark and moody and like a coffee shop vibe. And I'm like, oh, I have done this before, so I'm ready to go back. Like, let's run it back.
Yeah. And then because we've evolved as people and individuals, it's like really fun to see how we put our take on it now.
Like a different twist.
Yeah, a different twist. So talking about how we've evolved as individuals, you and I both have partners and families. I'm curious, you know, has your family evolved with you in the home? And I know your children, do you have one? I'm sorry. Do you have
just one? Yeah. Okay. Ella, she's 7.
Oh, yeah. Sweetest age.
She is. She's getting sassy, but she's still so sweet. Yeah. So angel fun. Baby.
I have 3 girls, 2 in high school, if you can imagine.
So fun. Yeah.
And I do get some pushback sometimes of ever changing our house. And especially my oldest is an introvert, and they tend to not like change as much.
Right.
So as we are always trying to inspire others outside our home, it's like a balance of having some kind of consistency and stability for our own family.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm asking for a friend.
Right.
How do you balance all these wonderful inspirational projects? Because I assume the majority of your work is at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Okay. How do you balance that with your family? Does your partner like the change? Does he resist some change too? How do their communication process?
Yeah. I think initially I did it the wrong way, which was just like, I'm going to do what I want and you all are just lucky I'm making it nice, like kind of thing, which worked for a while. And I think my partner's really relaxed. So he doesn't have like strong design taste in any direction. He's like a person that would consider himself not creative, even though I'm like, yes, you are. You just haven't practiced. So he gave me free reign of like, do whatever you want. He's also colorblind, so I can get away with a lot. So that's nice. And then my daughter like thrives in chaos. It's like the funniest thing. She for real is like, just likes things to be chaotic and active and fun and changing. And she, as long as she has all her people, like the environment can be whatever. She just needs like her people around her. Like she'll like miss her grandparents when they're not there, but like the house can be ripped apart and she's like, whatever. So I'm like kind of lucky in that I have like kind of the dream set up for just being like ever evolving. But yeah, learning to kind of really design for everyone and consider everyone in like those joint spaces. It was a lot of like hiding things in baskets and like making sure it's functional, but it looks cute kind of stuff. But it's a balance. It's like an ebb and flow. And I think it's like where you're constantly evolving, because the second like a room is done, it's like now everybody's older and we're not playing with those little baby toys anymore. And now we need to kind of change it up and we need the iPad charging station. And so yeah, just being comfortable with like, I'm never going to be done. You know, I like initially used to think like, okay, we'll eventually finish this house. Like, no, you will not. And for me, I always end up moving before I get close to done anyway. So
we're just amazing.
Constant state of flux and letting it be that.
And actually that to take a perspective from your daughter instead of seeing it as something negative, because a lot of people would see chaos and messiness or in between as something negative. It's actually, it can be seen as exciting.
Yeah.
And another opportunity to be creative in our own home. Our home is going to be our, home for a while because my girls love their schools and their neighborhood. And Southern California is probably a little more expensive.
Right.
Than a lot of other areas in the country. So we don't have the luxury to move. And I've really had to change my mindset.
Right.
Thankfully, I finally reached a point where I'm at peace and happy with that my home is going to be in flux for a while. And I don't know where we're where we're going to land later. So, but you know what? It gave me a brand new set of eyes as far as projects at home.
Yes.
I'm so excited about that. So, and one of the things I really want to do is help each person in the family maximize their self-care moments.
Yeah.
And
I love
so
that.
for you, because your job is physically demanding.
Right.
I can imagine you need a lot of downtime to rest and pause. I'm a tub time girl. I love taking baths.
Yeah.
What is your go-to self-care at home?
Yeah. I mean, it should be something better, but I think it's like scrolling on TikTok and just being in like a quiet space. Like it's like my house can be chaos, but my bedroom needs to be very like relaxing. I have like a little air filter that's kind of like a sound machine and like a cozy blanket and like the right temperature and like tea and like TikTok where I feel like I'm interacting with, I have so many friends on there. So like interacting with friends or like exploring new ideas or like getting new inspiration is kind of my like downtime. It's still very mentally active, but like my body, it's like lay down and not move for hours. But yeah, I've kind of found that like, as long as I have a place to go where I feel like I can completely unwind, the whole house can be chaos. But if I can shut the door and have like, one room that's put together is like all I need. When before I feel like I was trying to have the whole house to put together to create that feeling. But yeah, realizing that like sometimes it's less than you think it takes to give you that feeling of being secure or relaxed or safe and feeling like you can unwind.
I really love that because it gives people permission to not follow what traditionally we hear over and over again, right? Which is the setup is the same, but a lot, as a therapist, I generally say don't go onto your devices. It's probably too overstimulating.
Yeah.
But for you, it's creatively stimulating and it connects you to your friends. Like you find it a positive thing. And so this is where your self-care, and when I say your, I mean, general speaking, it's really up to you. Don't judge yourself based on what should be or could be, but just base it on what makes you feel good. And for you, it's doing exactly what you described.
Yeah. And it's not so much the activity itself, but like your relationship with it and how healthy that is, because I've definitely had like a very unhealthy relationship with social media in the past, for sure. So I absolutely get the advice of like, lock your device away and don't like have a device free space or whatever. But yeah, I think once you can have healthy boundaries around how you're using it and that it's really doing good in your life instead of distracting or being a negative influence, then that's what it is. Yeah.
That's very inspiring for me because I think I'm still in the journey of finding the balance and boundaries of social media in my personal life.
It's so hard.
It's so much. So my, one of my personal goals for this year is to continue. I've come a long ways, but I'd like to get to an even more peaceful place. I feel that too. It's like such an ebb and flow. Like just when you think you're okay, it's like then something else happens and now there's an influx of people like really intense and comments and so then there's times where I'm like, oh, I don't have a great relationship right now because people are all coming for me for how I built these stairs and it's like actually affecting me when sometimes I'm like, I don't care what you think. Some days I'm like, oh, I did do that wrong. Like you're right. Like so I feel that too. At the end of the day, we are all human. And I'm just grateful that we have found our homes as a home therapeutic, setting to be creative. I think it's safe to say for the both of us and for so many listeners, it's that urging, that craving to, share our voice through creativity. So I just wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your amazing abilities. And again, helping us understand that there's permission to not be perfect.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for your show and your work is like so beautiful, feeling such a needed space to help take people like so deep into what their home could be. So I'm inspired every day by what you do. And I'm so glad to be here.
I love it. Yeah. It's all about energy. And I always say the universe, connects people who are energetically aligned.
Yes.
I used to have a therapist. He was my mentor. And I remember him saying, because I was trying to build up a private practice for the first time when I graduated. And he's like, Anita, good people know good people. And that just stuck with me because I really believe that.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen it in action this past year of like people being brought into my kind of circle where I'm like, I see, like this is, everybody's going to win. And it's like people I can really encourage and build up and they do the same for me. So it's so special. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me.